Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @DougPless. Here are the key tenets to my approach of trading. This is the basis of my approach of trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. That certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with the ES futures. And for the Nasdaq 100, NDX is the underlying index, QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading versus planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as the directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma HERO to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for today, Monday, March 2nd. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, events, and earnings for today as well as the rest of the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups from earlier today. Then I'll take a look at the live market. And when I get to the live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know and I'd be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with news items. Let's take a quick look at the Spotgamma dashboard home screen. Take a look at the events calendar. And there are some data releases coming out this week. All right, today the ISM Manufacturing PMI data came out, and that was at 10 a.m. That came out greater than expected, but less than the previous number, but it's also greater than 50, indicating expansion. And then on Wednesday at 10 a.m., the ISM Services PMI data comes out. And then the big data release of the week comes out on Friday. That's the jobs report for February. And again, that's 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday. And also retail sales come out at that time. All right, so those are the data releases for this week. let's take a look at the earnings chart. And there are some stocks reporting earnings that you may want to take a look at. First of all, reporting earnings after the close today. ASTS, Space Mobile, Credo Technologies, Qubit, QUBT, I'm not quite sure I remember the name of that. That's a quantum computing stock. So that's after the close today. Then cyber security stock reports after the earnings on Tuesday, CrowdStrike. And then one stock that I do follow more closely, Broadcom, reports earnings after the close on Wednesday. And there you can see the expected move, just under plus or minus 8%. All right, so those are earnings reports coming up this week for stocks that I'm interested in. All right, let's move on now to positional analysis. Let's start with the S&P 500. This is the ES futures of Bookmap. Strong rally today, kind of an upside down day. More about that in a couple of minutes. So this rally really began in the overnight hours just before 4 a.m. with support right around the SPY 675, absolute gamma strike put wall, key level for SPY. Then at the open, let's take a closer look at that. At the open, ES found support right at its lower daily expected move. That's the dashed blue line, and broke above the SPX 6800 put wall, another key level. So two key levels there. ES, lower daily expected move, and then the 6800 put wall. Rally up to the SPY 685 large gamma 3 level. Resistance at that level a couple times. Now ES has traded up to the SPX 6890 volatility trigger, and the key level up above is now 6900. All right, before I spend more time on this chart, let's step back. Let's take a look at our higher time frame. Let's go to a 1 year, 1 day chart for SPX, the underlying index. So the rally that began last April 2025, has now resolved into some consolidation in 2026 between around 6,800 and 7,000. And Gulam, sorry, I can't pronounce the rest of that. Welcome. Glad you're here. Ask about the Indian market. Sorry, you're going to have to ask Bookmap support. So just send an email to support@bookmap.com. So I think Bookmap did support the Indian market at one time. I'm not sure that's still the case. So just send an email to support@bookmap.com. And that's certainly something that I do not look at. All right, so far, 6,800 to 6,890. And now 30-day 1 hour chart. So this is SPX, again, a 30-day 1 hour chart. And you can see the range. All right, Stephen, welcome. Glad you're here. Says Bookmap no longer supports the Nifty. I guess that's the Nifty 50. So there's your answer. Thanks, Stephen. All right, SPX 2026 consolidation, somewhere between 6,800 and 7,000, making a series of slightly lower highs and lower lows. And notable today is that SPX did not make a lower low. and found support again around 6,800. All right, let's take a look at the levels on this chart. First of all, the dashed purple lines are showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. This is based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Those levels remain in place for the entire week. Then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move, also based on the options market. That's based on the closing price again for SPX from last Friday. Those levels do change every day, and I do post expected moves every day the day before for SPX, ES, and NQ in the Options Dash Deck chat channel and Discord. And note, SPX did trade down below its lower daily expected move today and is now trading well above that level. And again, finding resistance at the 68.90 volatility trigger. That's right here. All right, those are the expected moves. Let's take a look at the Spotgamma levels on this chart. These are based on gamma-weighted open interest. They're provided to Spotgamma subscribers. They're available on a variety of trading platforms. Again, this is Thinkorswim. I'm going to point out the key levels. First of all, the put wall remains at 6,800. That's a strike with large net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support, as it has multiple times in the past 30 days. All right, that's the put wall. All right, the next level up is the volatility trigger that I mentioned before at 68.90. That is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And that level did shift down just slightly from Friday. It was at 6,900 on Friday, 68.95. So the volatility trigger shifted down 5 points compared with Friday. All right, the next level up is the 7,000 level. That's the absolute gamma strike. That's a strike with large absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma-weighted open interest is concentrated. And then finally, the call wall has now moved up to 7,100. That's a strike with large net positive gamma that can be expected to act as resistance. All right, South Pole, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Welcome, glad you're here. And Olivia, welcome, glad you're here as well. Olivia asked, how can we get these levels on our bookmap chart? I'll show you in just a minute. All right, so shifts and levels. Again, for SPX, volatility trigger slightly lower, call wall higher. And for SPY, we'll take a look at SPY in just a moment. SPY, the volatility trigger also shifted lower, as well as the absolute gamma strike shifted lower. So that is a bearish brace for SPY. All right, let's wrap up a review of SPX with a 1 minute chart. So you can see the general downtrend from last Thursday, Friday, gap down today, below the put wall, and then a quick recovery up to the volatility trigger. Put wall, actually that's the put wall right there. Quick reversal above the put wall, then now resistance at the 68.90 volatility trigger. All right, let's take a quick look at SPY, the other underlying index component. Let's zoom in on this. All right, there's that overnight support that I mentioned before at the SPY 675 put wall, absolute gamma strike. Then right at the open, support at the round number level, 678. Then up to the 687 level. So that's the SPY chart. Key level, overnight support at 675. All right, let's zoom in on this. All right, so again, I mentioned key levels, ES, lower daily expected to move, which was 6804.5. And again, I did post that in Discord yesterday. Actually, I posted that on Saturday. All right, then up to the SPY 685 level, down to the SPX 6839 zero gamma level, and then finding a resistance. You can't see the label, but it is at 6890. And then up above is the SPX 6900 level. And note there is a difference in price between ES and SPX. Today that offset is 9 points. So given that single digit number, you know one thing for sure, that the rollover the current contract, March contract expiring in just a couple of weeks. All right, Olivia asked, how do we get these levels on our Bookmap chart? All right, so there are a couple of ways. So if you are a Spotgamma subscriber, you can use those their cloud notes, which include SPX levels. I like to see more levels. I like to see SPX levels, SPY levels, and key ES levels, like that lower daily expected move. So I have total control over the levels that I show. So I use an add-on that's available in the Bookmap marketplace. And that is the Price Lines add-on. And note that Price Lines add-on points to a CSV file. And I update that every day. So I do it manually to get the best view of all the important levels, the levels that are important to me. So here's my spreadsheet. So here I'm showing SPY levels. For example, here's that 685 level. And then I use the index relationships that I post in the Options-Doug chat channel to get the correct ES numbers. And today that relationship is 10.0354. Then here are my SPX levels. And again, I'm showing that SPX to ES relationship at 9 points. So here's the volatility trigger SPX 6890 at ES 6899. All right, so that's how I get the levels on this chart. All right, South Pole asks, do you EquityHub to see negative and positive gamma strikes to give you confluence? All right, so South Pole, I do use EquityHub. And I assume you're talking about the put and call impact chart in the synthetic open interest mode. So let's take a look. We'll take a look at that. I do plan on looking at NVDA today. So when I get to NVDA, we'll take a look at EquityHub. And yes, again, I do use EquityHub. All right, so that's the S&P 500. Let's move on. Let's take a look at Nasdaq. Similar chart, very strong. Push at the open. Here's the NQ lower daily expected move. And note, NQ did trade a little bit lower than that just before the cash open, but broke out sharply up above it. And we'll take a look at setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, I know there are a lot of lines on this chart, so let's step back. Let's take a look at the underlying index charts first. So I'm going to start with QQQ. Overnight support, 595. Let's zoom in on this. And it looks like QQQ did not quite make it up to the overnight highs from Friday. So zoom in. Support at the 598 round number level, right at the open, then a blast higher, and no, QQQ did trade above its put wall, and absolute gamma strike at 600. And then in the range here we see on the chart, no spot gamma levels up above. Well, let's take a look at NDX. All right, strong rally for NDX as well. Back up to around the $25.10 volatility trigger in the 25,000 large gamma 2 level, just below that. And Terzog, welcome, glad you're here. Asked, does that mean you also enter levels manually on toss? New to vids, but really like your content. Great. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for your kind words, and you're welcome. All right, for Thinkorswim, for the indexes, I do not, there's very little manual intervention involved. So Spotgamma does publish a script file for Thinkorswim every day for the indexes. So let's go to Studies, Edit Studies, and this is the text file, the script that they post every day, every morning. So what I do is right-click here, Edit Sources, and I delete everything in here, and then I just paste in the new script, and that's all it takes. So you can see this is the Think script generated automatically for today, and that's the time it was generated. All right, it's a different story for stocks. What I did for stocks is I made a copy of this, and then I fill that out every day once I get the levels for certain stocks that I'm interested in. But for the indexes, if you just trade the S&P 500 and Nasdaq, that's all you need. That script that is generated automatically by Spotgamma, paste it in, takes less than a minute. All right, Nasdaq also starting to roll over a little bit, and here are the NDX levels that I mentioned: the 25,010 volatility trigger and 25,000 large gamma 2 level. And again, breakout above the lower daily expected move and the 600 absolute gamma strike put wall. And we'll take a look at setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, so let's wrap up our positional analysis by taking a look at gamma. So let's go to the trace gamma heat map. Looks like HERO is rolling over pretty sharply. Let me zoom in on this. All right, so what this is showing is market makers' gamma position. Red shading indicates a negative gamma. Remember, in negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility, looking for market makers trading with price, so a wider range of movement. And then a positive gamma, like up above, we're looking for lower volatility with market makers trading against price. So let's step back in time. And by the way, the white candlesticks are price for SPX, and this purple line here is the HERO signal. So let's step back in time, go back close to the open. So there's the open. SPX opened in negative gamma with positive gamma up above around 6,900, or the hedge wall at 68.90, which is the volatility trigger. All right, so let's go through time. You can see that positive gamma building at 6,900 as traders sell calls, market makers buy the calls, hence the positive gamma. That gamma continues to build. Now starting to diminish as price starts to roll over and HERO rolls over as well. So this is the HERO signal. Hedging impact real-time options. So let's take a look at that right now. So let's move on from positional analysis to execution. So the levels that we took a look at on the Bookmap charts, they're updated once a day. They're based on open interest that is updated once a day overnight. Now this trace gamma heat map is updated every 10 minutes. Now let's look at real-time data. And this is the HERO signal again. Hedging impact real-time options. It's available to Spotgamma subscribers. And this is the S&P 500 index signal. So there are two signals that we can take a look at for the S&P 500. Again, this is the first one, S&P 500 index signal. This is showing options trades of market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index components. That's SPX and SPY. We've already taken a look at those. Also includes ES and XSP. The white line is price for SPX, and the purple line is the HERO signal. A rising HERO signal indicates traders are taking positive delta options positions. They're buying calls and or selling puts. And then a falling HERO signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options positions. They're buying puts and or selling calls. So let's see what they are actually doing. And the blue line shows puts. The orange line shows calls. So this is showing traders are taking advantage of the high volatility. They are selling calls. That's shown by the falling orange line of the negative delta notional. And they're also selling puts. That's shown by the rising blue line and the positive delta notional. So remember, selling puts, that's a positive delta position. Selling calls, that's negative delta. So let's zoom in just a little bit. Let's take a look at the morning price action. So we can see in the morning this bullish opening drive that lasted about 45 minutes was driven by put sellers in the index. Calls were pretty flat. And then right around 10:15, traders started selling calls and buying puts. And that was traders resumed selling puts. And that really slowed down about 11:45. So net for the day, traders were selling puts in the indexes. And then finally, SPX found resistance at the 68.90 volatility trigger. And that's when the index really started to roll over. Traders started selling calls more aggressively, started buying puts, and now that's bearish momentum to the downside. All right, there's one other signal that we can take a look at for the S&P 500. That is the S&P 500 equities. One thing I want to check before I do that is this next expiry. So let's go back to the total signal, next expiry. To jump back. All right, so you can see the next expiry, that's options that expire today, and the teal line. And it looks like that is more bearish than all expirations, all trades, which expire today, tomorrow, next week, next month. All right, so let's turn that off. Let's go back to puts and calls. Check the equity signal. So again, remember the move this morning was primarily driven by put sellers. And now let's take a look at the S&P 500 equity signal. And this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index, the equities, all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. And you can see today, for most of the day, driven by call buyers. So when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. And that was pretty steady all morning. Call buyers, rising orange line, and they finally start to slow down right around 1 o'clock as S&P 500 SPX reached the volatility trigger 6890. So after that, they stopped selling, buying calls, started buying puts, and the S&P 500 starts to roll over. Right back to ES. So we know there's an options driver for price from the open, buying calls in the equities, selling puts in the index, and until that finally stops right around 1 o'clock at the 6890 level. So let's take a look at Bookmap now. So you can see all the aggressive buyers that came in just to the open. Volume dots at Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. Magenta dots more sellers than buyers. You can see the large green volume dots at the open. Very strong bullish opening drive. A little bit of chop. Then another strong drive up to the 687 and the 6890 level. Looking at the subchart here, the rising blue line, dark blue line, that's showing cumulative volume delta rising sharply at the open, continues to move higher, then starts to roll over just after 1 p.m. as volume dots shift from green to magenta. More magenta starts to come in, and now you can see the aggressive sellers coming in. The yellow line is showing stop orders. So the move up this morning was driven by buy stop orders as well. Then finally, large traders have been fading this move. That's shown by the following blue line. That's showing iceberg orders. Large traders with iceberg orders fading the move, selling strength. All right, so nice rally in the morning up until about 1 o'clock when the target was achieved, the 6890. And I guess one more target up above, 6,900. And so far, the S&P 500 did not make it up to that level. All right, let's take a look at Nasdaq. Similar chart. Very strong bullish opening green volume dots. Now, in the case of Nasdaq, the light blue line showing iceberg orders has been rising. So in the case of Nasdaq, large traders are buying strength, not selling strength with iceberg orders. Cumulative volume delta, on the other hand, has been falling. So let's see what else has been driving Nasdaq. Let's go to HERO, back to HERO. take a look at the Nasdaq signal. So just like the S&P 500, there are two signals that we can take a look at. First of all, the S&P 500 and Nasdaq index signal showing options trades and market maker hedging activity. For the Nasdaq index components, we've already taken a look at those, QQQ and NDX. So this is showing just like the S&P 500 index. Traders were selling puts, shown by the rising blue line. They were also selling calls, and that was up until about 9:55. Call sellers took the foot off the gas. So that's Nasdaq. Then traders started buying calls. So overall, this is a pretty choppy hero signal. So there's another hero signal that we can take a look at for Nasdaq. That's the Mag 7 signal. This is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven. And this is a lot more clear to me. Traders selling puts, shown by the rising blue line, up until about 12:30, and then started buying calls again around 10:05, driving price higher in the Mag 7 stocks: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVDA, Tesla. These stocks make up a very large component of the Nasdaq, and we're definitely driving price higher in Nasdaq today. And we'll take a look at some of those stocks in just a minute. Are there any questions about the indexes? All right, let's move on. Let's take a look at some stocks. So I've got a couple of several Mag 7 stocks, and then several crypto-related stocks that are quite strong today. All right, so let's start with Meta. Very strong bullish day in Meta today. Traders selling puts, buying calls. Puts shown by the blue line, calls shown by the orange line. Full alert signal, significant options activity, get your attention. That alert is shown on the orange line, but it's not necessarily just related to calls. It's always shows up on the orange line, but it's related to both puts and calls. So traders selling puts, buying calls. Meta breaks above the 650 key gamma strike, finds resistance, then support that level. And now trading above that level. So let's take a look at Bookmap. And note traders continue to buy calls. They're also buying puts now. So let's go take a look at Meta. Very strong day in Meta. There's the 650. $650 key gamma strike, resistance, support, series of higher lows, then finally absorption at the 660 level. The heat map in Bookmap shows a history of limit orders in the order book, and those were limit sell orders at 660. So limit sell orders at 650, 655 were consumed, but they were not consumed at the 660 level. And those limit orders in the order book typically act as magnets for price. So there's Meta, very strong day today. All right, next stock, NVIDIA. Very strong bullish opening drive. Rising cumulative volume delta. Show them all the green volume dots. Rising cumulative volume delta. Key target above is 185. Limit sell orders in the order book. So let's see what options traders have been doing in NVIDIA. Let's zoom in on this. All right, so it looks like the call buyers took a while to get going. Just after 9:50, traders started buying calls, chasing price higher. So remember, all the green volume dots we we looked at in NVIDIA. So it was aggressive buyers just buying shares, initially driving the price higher to the 180. Hedge wall, key gamma strike. Again, key level acting as resistance, then support, and then the call buyers helping to drive price higher as NVIDIA broke above that level. Now it looks like the call buyers have taken their foot off the gas and NVIDIA is consolidating. So let's go back to Bookmap. There's the 180 level, resistance, support, support. And again, all the green volume dots indicate traders are buying shares. Aggressive buyers, buying shares. Hello, Goose. Welcome. Glad you're here. All right, so there's NVIDIA. Target at 185, just above. Back to HERO. All right, so if the call buyers, if traders start buying calls again, that's the next target up above. All right, and then South Pole wanted to look at EquityHub. So let's go to EquityHub. And synthetic open interest model. So this is showing negative gamma. So again, we're looking at, oh, Goose, you're welcome to ask questions. I appreciate any questions, so if you do have questions, feel free to ask. All right, so this is showing negative gamma throughout the range on this chart, which is right around 150 to well over 200, negative gamma. So remember, in negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility. So we're looking for market makers to be trading with price throughout the range shown on this chart with the highest volatility point at 164. And again, we're looking at a target up above of 185, which would be right about here, which is a positive gamma strike, right at 185. All right, so this indicates to me that NVIDIA could slow down 185 to 190 in this slightly less negative gamma zone. All right, so that's NVIDIA. Next stock, Tesla. All right, put sellers driving price higher in Tesla today. Zoom in on this. Key level up above 400, hedge wall, key gamma strike, put wall. Tesla breaks above that level, then finds support at that level. Now finding support at that 400 level again. So let's go take a look at Bookmap. Go to Tesla. Very strong day in Tesla today. Breaking above that 400 level. There it is right there. A lot of green volume dots. Let me adjust the size of the dots a little bit. Oops. A lot of aggressive buyers buying shares. Rising cumulative volume delta. Support at 400. Support at 400. So the high liquidity targets up above were taken out, 395. That didn't take but a couple of minutes. At 400 again. The next high liquidity target up above is 405. All right, that's Tesla. One more stock. PLTR, defense-related stock. More aggressive buyers, green volume dots. Let's see what options traders are doing. Let's go to PLTR. And call buyers, definitely driving price higher today. Classic hero pattern, classic bullish opening drive. Traders buying calls from the open. Full alert comes in, signals significant options activity. Get your attention, call buyers. Very nice. Divergence long. Call signal continues to move up while price pulls back. Sending up again a very nice divergence long. And then the call buyers have finally taken the foot off the gas. That really started right around 11. So very steep slope up until about 11 and then slowed down. And that pullback was right around 950, 955. Let's take a look at that on Bookmap. So there's that very deep pullback. Great entry point for a long from 142 up to 147. By the way, today seems like somewhat an upside down day to day. Some of the stocks, some of the things that were stocks, ETFs that were strong pre-market are now weak, and the stocks and ETFs that were weak are now strong. And we've taken a look at several of those. All right, there's Palantir, defense-related. Also a beaten down software stock that has been moving up a little bit recently. All right, next stock I want to take a look, stocks that I want to take a look at are crypto-related. First, Robinhood, and Bitcoin strong today, and the crypto-related stocks are responding. Bullish opening drive, bullish move in Robinhood here. Key liquidity target at 80. It looks like some sellers have come in at 79.50, and so far this is just absorption at this level. Those orders at 79.50 running 80 have not been consumed yet. Let's see what options traders have been doing in Robinhood. Call buyers and put sellers a little bit later. And know that 80 level is the call wall key gamma strike. Call buyers from the open driving price higher. Again, another flow alert. A little bit of congestion. Nice entry point for long. Another entry point for long. And then finally, the call buyers took the foot off the gas right around 11:15. And Robinhood has been consolidating. So by looking at these charts, you can see the trades, the big moves take place mostly in the morning. You know, if you watch options or if you trade options from 9:30 to 11 to 12, something like that. So that's when the trades occur. So that's Robinhood. Next, Circle, stablecoin stock, very strong today. Let me check something. So far, Circle is leading my list of stocks, which is mostly the HERO stocks, or HERO stocks are a subset of all the stocks that are available for HERO. Anything that I would ever be interested in trading. Circle is at the top of that list. Change from the open just a little over 17%, and net change for the day around 13.5%. So very strong day for Circle. Call buyers helping to drive price higher. So let's take a look at Bookmap. Let's go to Circle. Very strong, very fast, bullish opening drive. I didn't have time to add this to Price Lines. Then finally, liquidity. Right around 95 was the final target for the day so far. So a jump from around 80 to 95 as call buyers and aggressive buyers were driving price higher in Circle. All right, so one more crypto-related stock, Strategy. Another strong bullish opening drive. A lot of aggressive buyers up to the 140 level. 140 is the call wall, key gamma strike. Rising cumulative volume delta up to that 140 level. Then the sellers start to come in. And now my Strategy is consolidating. Let's see what options traders are doing. Go to Strategy. Again, call buyers and put sellers driving price higher. And they take the foot off the gas as Strategy reaches the 140 call wall, key gamma strike. Now the flow alert came in at the open, signal significant options activity. All right, any questions about stocks? Does anyone have any stocks they want me to take a look at? All right, let's go back to the indexes. I'm going to shift to the total signal. Let's go back to the S&P 500 equities. All right, so that's turning higher again. Now it looks like ES, SPX, has broken out above the 6890 volatility trigger, headed towards 6900. All right, so the HERO signal here. One thing to note, the index HERO signal for S&P 500 is typically more noisy than the S&P 500 equity signal, but it does tend to mark the turning points a little bit more clearly than the equities. But we can see both signals turned higher right around 2 p.m. All right, let's go check Bookmap. Go back to ES. Aggressive buyers come in. Large traders fading this move with iceberg orders, and they're determined to sell ES. Rising cumulative volume delta. Very clear shift in volume dots. Sellers are exhausted. Buyers come in. Zoom in on this a little bit more. You can see a few limit sell orders just down below that were not filled. Aggressive buyers starting to come in. Now, just below the 6,900 level, finding some resistance at the SPY 688 volatility trigger. And now some aggressive sellers are starting to come in. And remember the HERO signal for the index started to get pretty choppy. Back to the S&P 500 index. Zoom in on this. Interesting flow alert. Signal significant options activity, a potential reversal in hedging flow, in this case from positive delta to negative delta. That's what happened. It remains to be seen how the index will respond. So the question is right now, the 6890 level that acted as resistance, will it act as support when tested from above? So let's go back to Bookmap. All right, so ES is right at that level. All right, so some buyers are starting to come in. This last move up was partially driven by buy stop orders. Then aggressive sellers came in, shown by the magenta volume dots. All right, so now it looks like that 6890 level and ES 6900 acting as support. So next target up above, if ES can make it above the 688 volatility trigger, is the SPX 6900 large gamma 2 level. Let's go check trace. All right, so the HERO signal starting to turn up. Let's check trace. All right, so the gamma at 6,900 has strengthened again. So it looks like we can see 10 minutes ago, that was 48, 30, 26, 60, 53 million. All right, so compared 30 minutes ago with 10 minutes ago, so that positive gamma, that strike has increased, now at a 99 percentile level. And that is definitely the target. Let's zoom in. Let's get a little bit closer look at that. So you can see that zone of positive gamma there just above the 6890 volatility trigger. Let's check charm. All right, charm showing a potential pinning target. Blue buying support below, red selling pressure up above, right at 6,900. So nice reversal just above the 6890 volatility trigger. There are some sellers coming in. Let's see if the buyers can take it up to 6,900. It may take this too long to load, but I want to see if market pulse price change marked this low as an extreme with as a good entry point. All right, SPX 6900 directly on deck. And there it is. Beautiful setup. Reversal at 6,900, 68.90 up to 6,900. All right, it looks like it may take too long for that to load. All right, last call for questions, comments. All right, everyone, thank you very much for watching. Have a great afternoon. Remember, Services PMI, ISM Services PMI comes out at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. And then Broadcom reports earnings after the close on Wednesday. So we'll talk about those. All right, everyone, again, thanks for watching. Thanks for questions and comments in YouTube. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye. Oh, here we can see the market pulse price change extreme, marking that low point there just above 68.90 as the entry point for long. All right, everyone, again, have a great afternoon. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.